Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there.
What do you make of the Big Ten as a whole? Because I think you, obviously, with your alignment and do an amazing job covering the sport, and appreciate, frankly, on your national platform, how you cover the sport, because so many people are like, oh yeah, we'll do college football because we have to. You do it because you love it. And I appreciate your coverage. But when you look at the Big Ten, I think that they're solid. I think at the top, they're super elite. Ohio State's the best team in the country, fewest questions. Beyond them, I think Oregon, we've kind of put Oregon in kind of the chosen group of, hey, this group's right there. And they didn't, like, their wins last year were fine. Blowing out a Utah team was impressive, but it's not like, we got way bent out of shape about, oh, they beat Cal by 30. Like we kind of anointed them, I think, before we needed to. And then we found out against Washington that maybe there's still work to be done. I think they've done that work. So I think they are now on the inside looking out at the rest of the college football world. But how do they stack up against the SEC? Like, when you look at the Big Ten, you size them up, cut them up, 18 deep versus the SEC 16. Right. Who do you think is superior?
Well, I think Oregon is something that we haven't seen out west since Pete Carroll and Ed Orgeron. They've just done it differently. They've purchased big bodies. So I think Oregon stacks up in the – I mean, they went out and they bought the best left tackle on the West Coast in the last several years, 2 years ago. He started. They went and Phil Knight has essentially said, before I die, I want a national championship and I'll spend whatever it takes. People talk about the Texas NIL. Oregon's is unlimited. They'll just buy whatever they have to. That's really how it's done. USC's is 13 million. I have that on 13 million. Depending on the ascension of the program, it could get to 15, but USC's fine. They're not Texas. They're not A&M. They're not Ohio State. They're not, maybe not Georgia. They're not Oregon for sure. So I think Oregon has purchased, and this is not a criticism. This is all legal now, right? It's, they've gone, first of all, their marketing is enhanced. Even with Mario Cristobal, their recruiting, to me, is the best on the West Coast. The best on the West Coast. USC's is consistently second because of the name brand. But Oregon's been recruiting the West Coast. Cristobal landing very well. If they want a receiver or a DB, they get them. If there's a top edge rusher, they just get them. They own the Northwest mostly for the players they want. It's a very weak recruiting year, in my opinion, in the West Coast this year, especially the Northwest. I think they match up fine. I think eye test, Texas looks really big. When they faced Alabama last year, the last couple of years, I looked at it and I thought, God, this is what Alabama looks like the last 10 years against everybody else. You're like, man, Texas passes the eye test. I think Oregon's going to beat Ohio State and Eugene.
Yeah.
Because I think Dan Lanning has done something that I didn't think a Southern guy was going to do with no head coaching experience. He's immediately, I know what Oregon is. I really do. They're a little Detroit Lions. Relentless. They play hard. They got, I think privately they would admit Kalen DeBoer outcoached him. And Washington had a bizarre set of great offensive talent, almost no NFL bodies. And they matched up with Oregon. I mean, frankly, Penix deep ball, Rome Adunze. Oregon wasn't getting beat because they were being fooled. It was just a bad matchup. I said it before. Washington was going to beat Texas. They were not going to beat Michigan. And so I think I watched Oregon play Washington twice, once live. I thought Oregon had more good players. I just thought Washington was a terrible matchup. So I think Oregon matches up with Ohio State. And I think if you match up with Ohio State, you match up with everybody. I think Alabama's underrated. I think Kalen DeBoer is magnificent. I think you know what he is, reminds me of? He's really Chris Peterson.
He does have some Peterson vibes for sure.
Where you're like, they will never be outcoached at Alabama. Ever. There are games with Nick Saban where I felt if you had a quarterback that was good off script, you could frustrate Nick. I didn't think he was outcoached. I thought there were things Nick did better than other coaches. Kalen DeBoer, it's almost magical. Like Washington's talent on the defensive side is they had an interior defensive lineman who I think the Rams got undrafted free agent. I mean,
Yeah, Tuli Latuli Nasanoa.
and they just didn't have any talent. So a lot of it was magical. And Chris Peterson gets the Huskies to a playoff, and you're like, how? They don't have Alabama's players. So I think Oregon has purchased, recruited, and developed players. I think Lanning has a plan. I think they match up. I am not as confident with Ohio State because I just have felt for 3 years, and I'll ask you, Greg, it's not that Michigan beat them, it's how they beat them. They just outrushed them. They took over all the second halves. Ohio State's never been prettier, but they've never been more finesse. I'll ask you, what are they beyond talented? What are they?
I think look, they have been a sports car where winning the Big Ten the last couple of years has required a big diesel vehicle, a dually, if you will. Like I don't want to say GMC or Ford and like tick people off. I would say Ford's, it's Michigan, so that feels fair, right? Let's just go with that. They have an F-150 or an F-250. That was one in the Big Ten the last couple of years, just the reality. So I don't think that they're finesse though. Like, I don't know if that's entire, and I understand the characterization and the way
by Ohio State standards, they're finesse.
Total compared to the Urban Meyer version, 2015 Ohio State versions, that's finesse. But that was a group that was so outrageously talented. I remember watching that game in 2015 against Bama on New Year's Day, the first iteration of the college football playoff, with Zeke Elliott and Cardale Jones. Like, these guys are freaks. Now, not only can they fly, but these guys will pound you. They are so crazy physical. And I think that the Big Ten has long been a league that was won with physicality. And then Ohio State found, hey, we can win with physicality, but we also have some high octane machines on the outside that we need to feed. So I think they've kind of gotten away from themselves a bit. And that's why the hire of Chip Kelly was so massive. Because if you look 23 consecutive years, the team that has outrushed the other in the game between Michigan and Ohio State wins the game. You ain't going to outrush Chip Kelly. That's who he is. That's what he believes in. And while people will look at the Oregon years and think, oh, they were finesse. No, they weren't. Just because they used tempo doesn't mean they were finesse.
That's right.
Look at the UCLA years. Oh, because they wear the light blue, they're finesse. No. UCLA was far from finesse. UCLA ran it down LSU's throat.
Yep.
In the Rose Bowl a couple years ago. He has gone out and prioritized running back. They go out and get Quinshon Judkins. They already had Travion Henderson. The offensive line is a question mark. But what Chip Kelly can do is they're going to play hard and they're going to get by a little bit running the football with smoke and mirrors. So I think their traditional run sets that they've used the last couple of years, you're not going to beat Michigan with that because Michigan's got better D linemen than you have O linemen. I don't know why. They just do. And they've had that for years. And they're probably going to have it again this year based on what they bring back up front defensively. But if you have one side of the offensive line blocking one play, the left side of the offensive line blocking another play, two completely different plays, you're reading a guy right in the middle. You can't block him, so you might as well read him. And you got a pass play off of it. Now you're cooking with gas. So I think Chip Kelly being hired by Ryan Day acknowledged that his run game was a blind spot. And that's a really hard thing for coaches to do too, right? I mean, hey, I've won a lot of games. I've lost 5 games in my career as a head coach. Like, yeah, I got to acknowledge, though, that that's a little bit of a blind spot for me. I need Chip Kelly to come in. I'll handle the pass concepts. He handles the run concepts. And now we're going to make this thing work together perfectly. So I really like Ohio State this year, but you're 100% right. I mean, Michigan had their number. It was a terrible matchup, much like you just talked about with Oregon and Washington. Terrible matchup for Ohio State. And I wasn't surprised at all to see Michigan win 3 straight against them.
Yeah, so I'm predicting Oregon beats Ohio State in Eugene, but Ohio State gets further in the playoff and plays for the national championship. I don't know who they'll play.